Hey Amanda, how you doing today? Good to see you.
Hi, Kayo. It's really good to see you. I'm doing really well. Just saying that the sun's shining, so can't complain. It's been raining all morning, so it's good. All good. Thank
Well,
you.
I'm glad
Yeah.
to hear that you're having a good day so far.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's all good.
yeah,
And
and
you? You as
yeah,
well?
likewise. I can't complain at all. Yeah, so let the viewers know who you are, what you do, and why you do it, Amanda.
Sure. So I'm Amanda, obviously. I coach in the relationship space for women mainly that are struggling in their relationships and are feeling very, very disconnected from their partners, husbands, or long-term relationships and marriages. And they're at that point where they're deciding, do I stay and reconnect or do I walk away? So I help them through the whole process. So if they mainly the decision, that may be the choice that they need to do the decision, or it could be that they've already decided and they want to either reconnect or they want to walk away. So I help them navigate that space. And the reason I came into this was because I was in that situation myself. So I was at the point where I didn't know what I should be doing and I didn't know how to get the answer. So I ended up reaching out to a coach and I joined a coaching program. And it taught me things that I didn't realize I didn't know. I couldn't believe I didn't know this stuff. Actually, it was quite eye opening. And I've always considered myself to be, fairly grounded, emotionally intelligent person. But when I had learned this understanding, it just shifted things, really in a really big way. And it's just that we if we want to be good at relationships, we need to know this stuff, and we just don't. And it's not anyone's fault. It's just that we don't get taught this stuff. We get if we want to get some financial help, we go to a financial advisor. If we want to get some help with our car, we go to, a specialist, a mechanic. And when it comes to relationships, we're just kind of expected to know how to figure it out by ourselves. And, there's just some bits missing. And it's not difficult stuff. It's just when you know this stuff and you can apply it in your relationship, it really transforms everything, can make a really big difference. So
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
that's yeah, so that's how I kind of got into it. And then I realized that wow, if I don't know this stuff, then there are so many other people that are really struggling. And I do find that by the time someone comes to me, they've been in disconnection for quite some time. It's been, years, sometimes even longer than that, decades, and they have really disconnected with their partners and they just don't know how to get back. They're stuck in that cycle of repeating patterns, repeating behaviors, and they just don't know how to get out. So it's just a case of learning a few things. It's actually learning and understanding of really how humans work, how we all work. And when we have that really good understanding, foundational principles in place, we can then navigate ourselves better. And it's all to do with navigating ourselves because we don't know how to navigate ourselves that well. And mainly when I say that, I'm talking about our insecurities. We're taught actually almost the opposite. We're taught that we shouldn't really have insecurities and we try and personal development our way out of these insecurities, and we really shouldn't do that. We are given insecurities, so a lot of the time we are in resistance to them, but what we need to do is understand them and work with them. And when we do that, a lot of the mental load, if you like, just starts to fall away because you understand yourself better, which means you start to get a better sense of yourself, and you start knowing how to navigate yourself. You know how to then you see in your partner and you see what's happening with them and you see how they're navigating themselves or what they're doing, and actually you don't take things so personally. And when that happens, a lot of that overthinking, that stuckness feeling, it starts to lift, and what you're left with is space. And when you've got space, that's when other things can come in. And when you've got space, that space for curiosity. And curiosity is a gift that we have no idea how well it plays in our relationships. Because especially if you're in a disconnected place, you're making assumptions that you know everything about that person, you know all what they're doing and way they think and how everything is going. And that keeps you in that stuck place. But the minute you start to get a bit curious, the minute you start to think, I wonder why they're thinking that. I think this, but they don't think that. So I wonder, instead of like, why are you not thinking like I think? Why, we tend to have that kind of thinking around our relationships. They're not doing it the way that I want them to do things. And when we're in that place, there's no space there, there's no choice there. So when you start to navigate yourself really well, navigate someone else, you've got space, you've got curiosity, and then there you can go somewhere from that. You've got room to move from there, and you're way more neutral. And when you're neutral, you come at it with a different energy, and energy is everything. We're energetic beings. So when you are presenting a question, or you're curious and you've got that neutrality around it, and you're not, so tightly wound up with, with trying to defend your position or justify yourself or make a point, that kind of thing, then your energy changes, and your partner has no choice but to kind of interact with a different energy. I'm not saying it happens overnight or instantly, but over time that does change. And then that gives you, it gives you the space, but it also gives you room to move, and you've got somewhere to go with that. You can, other things, you've got access to fresher thinking, access to newer thoughts. And when that happens, that changes, because then you have your own realizations of something could actually be different. And then you work off that. And then you're working from that baseline, as opposed to the one before, which, won't get you any further than you're just like on a bit of a hamster wheel with that.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, so like you yourself, it was through receiving coaching that inspired you to get into coaching, as
Yeah.
you were mentioning. So obviously, for you to go into coaching, you was having some issues that you wanted to resolve within relationships that you needed resolving. So when you think back, we all have different issues when we look back at our previous relationships that we had to navigate through to get to where we are now. So when you think back, what were some of the struggles that you had to overcome in order to get to where you are now regarding your relationships?
Yeah, so for me, it was how do I decide, what do I do, do I stay or do I leave? That was really the point that we were at, and the decision in the end was to leave. And I think, given the information that I had at the time, I think it was the right decision. I didn't know then what I know now, so who knows? But in that moment, it was the right decision. But the things that I think I struggled with is probably just not being able to see someone else's reality. And that is something that we all really tend to struggle with, is that we only have our own lens as a viewpoint, and and that's based from our experiences, our growing up, our schooling, our traumas even, and looking at other people's relationships. We have our own lens, and each lens is individual to each person as our fingerprint. So no one else on the planet sees the same things the way you do. So when I was faced with sort of things that I didn't know about myself, it was in a more of a dismissal of not really being able to see it. But that's because I didn't have the understanding. So I wasn't able to step into someone else's reality. And when you can do that, you just see things from a very different viewpoint. And you have to be open to looking at yourself. Self-reflection is huge, and that's something I probably didn't do as well. I think I do it now, and I'm really open to seeing how am I seeing this time? How am I doing it this time? And but I think when you are quite closed off to not wanting to see how you behave yourself, I think that really, it closes a lot of doors. It doesn't open you up to other possibilities. And I'm a big believer that we are here to learn, to grow, to expand. And when we have these challenges, we are meant to learn from them. So and when we don't do that, we stay in the same cycle because we're not learning anything, so we can't grow, so we stay stuck. So for me personally, I think that was quite a big thing for me, not being able to see things from a different perspective.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. Like you mentioned, feeling stuck within yourself, and people can be stubborn when they're used to having things like the way they want to see it all the time. So,
Mm.
like, obviously for you, you had to step out of yourself to really see yourself. So, what was the actual trigger point where that made you realize that, hang on a minute, I actually need to look at things from a different perspective? What was said to you, or what did you learn that made you actually step out of yourself and actually look at yourself from a different perspective?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I learned, which was probably a massive game changer for me, was how thought works. Because I think we are under the impression that we have these circumstances happen into our lives, and then we react to that. We base our feelings from those circumstances, and then we react to that. And actually, that's not how it works. We are in a relationship with our thinking first before anything else. So when a circumstance happens, it's actually our thought that gets filtered. It gets filtered through our thought process before we actually have the feeling. And I didn't know that well. So now when you realize that actually circumstances are pretty neutral, it's just you're thinking about that circumstances, you give that meaning, then that creates the feeling that you're in. So it's been able to view that very differently, which is a massive game changer, because when you realize actually it's not truth, whatever you're experiencing is not, your thoughts are not facts. They are, how compelling they may seem, they are not facts. They are just thoughts that are passing through, and actually if you just let them pass, another one's right behind it coming straight in. So but when we hold on to that thought of, especially if it's a difficult or uncomfortable thought, we get really wrapped up in it and we go down a spiral that we really don't need to be going down. But when we understand how it works, and this is a lot of what I teach, is it's a lot of stuff is actually more it's half teaching, half coaching, actually, because it's just principles behind being a human being and how we operate as a human being. Because once we understand that principle, then we can work off that baseline. So when you understand how thought works, then you will view things very differently, and you just don't see things in the same way. So when you don't see things in the same way, it gives you access to to clearer thoughts and fresher thinking. So for me personally, that was probably the biggest game changer, is really understanding how thoughts work. And thoughts are just not factual. They're just, we think they are, but they're not. So it's a huge realization when you see that, and when you see it in action and you see it for yourself, because that's the only time you can have a realization, is when it happens to you yourself, when you experience it. It's all very well me telling people, but when you teach them this, how to look for it and how it works, then they see it for themselves, and then that's how they can have their fresh insight and fresh realization, and that's the gateway to change. So
yeah, for sure, for sure. Like it can be a lot of work, all of this, like self-elevation and self-realization, and it does require people to confront their own ego, and a lot of
yeah,
people are not willing to do the work, so they kind of look at relationships like, that's a lot of work for me right now. I'd rather just focus on my career. And a lot of people, when they do that, they just focus head on into their career and start to neglect their intimate side. And there starts
yeah,
to become a distance or a gap between themselves and their intimate life. So,
yeah,
but along the way, they realize that there's a need in them for intimacy and they want to
yeah.
bridge that gap again. So, in your opinion, how can people that have immersed themselves so much into their professional life that has created a gap between themselves and their intimate side start to bridge that gap once again?
So I think the first thing is they've got to be willing. If you're not willing, then you're not really going to get too far. And I think if you can just recognize that there is a problem, which a lot of people don't want to do that, they just want to just bury their head in the sand and carry on. But if you are willing to recognize that there's a problem and willing to just learn this stuff, because it's really not hard. And if you think about relationships, they are the cornerstone of our world. We are in a relationship with ourselves, we are in a relationship with life, and we are in a relationship with other people. And when you get your relationship with yourself first right, then your relationship with life changes. You start to view things, you start to see all the beauty of life and what it has to offer, and then actually organically your relationship with other people will form really well from there. So if you're at that point where you want to change and you want some change in your relationship, it always starts with you. It's got to start with you first, and you've got to get that bit right. And then once that bit is right and correct, then you will view things very differently, and then you're more open, and then you are more likely to connect with another person when you feel good about yourself. Because when you have a very strong sense of self, and I'm guessing what you're from the typical person that you're describing, which is, I'm just going to focus on work, I'm not going to deal with my relationship. They don't have a good strong sense of who they are. They don't have a very good sense of self-sovereignty, that kind of thing. And when you have that, you become really good at relationships. And we all need to be good at relationships. These are, essential skills that we just can't afford to not have, because it affects everything. It affects not only just our personal life, but when your, personal relationships are good, all your other relationships are good. Your relationships with your children are good, your relationships with your family, your colleagues. So it is so important. And when you think about, actually, it's maybe just a few weeks or months of work versus what, a decade of unhappiness, when you put that into comparison of maybe just spending a few weeks or hours, even if you condense it down, it's like 6 to 8 hours of work, then if you're not prepared to do that, then I don't know what to say. It's you're just going to carry on as you are. But it's worth the effort. And I think when you start to see the change and you start to see the differences, because then you are empowered, and that is and you've got ownership. And that is a way more better place to be working from a relationship from. You are a much better person to be in a relationship with when you are an empowered person and you have ownership of things. People want to be in a relationship with you when you are like that. So why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't we want to be like that? Because it just creates an easier life, way easier. It's much easier to be like that. And when you are empowered and you have a really good sense of self, when things are going on outside of life, you're not in reaction to that. But when you have a strong sense of self, life is in reaction to you, right? And that is the position you want to be in. It's not you're dependent on everything externally being okay for you to be okay. That's not how it works. Actually, life is in reaction to you. Life is a mirror of you. So we've got to get this stuff right. And once all these things are in place, then everything else falls naturally and organically into place.
Yeah.
But you've got to be willing. You've got to be willing to do some self-reflection and realize that we have blind spots, because we all have them. If you're in the jar, you can't see the label when you're in the jar, right? So you've got to be able to just be willing to be open to see what there is. And when you do that, it's actually not very scary, because I think what people are afraid of generally are the insecurities and things that they don't like about themselves. But actually, we all have them. Like, we all have flaws, we all have frailties, and we can't escape that. And when we realize actually what they are, it's like, well, you've got a choice of which ones you have. You've got to pick one, right? You've got to have one. You can't escape not having it. So when you realize what it is and you understand it and you work with it, life just becomes a lot easier, and relationships naturally or organically become a lot easier.
Yeah, for
And when
sure.
you see it, it's life changing. It is literally life changing. It's a game changer. So, but you've got to be willing to put it, to do that, and you've got to be willing to put in the work.
Yeah, yeah, we definitely will be going around in circles if we want to make a change and we don't actually make that change. Like, nothing's going to change until you're willing to make that change. So that's definitely
Yeah,
true. Yeah.
yeah.
So a major issue that people do face in relationships tend to be expectations that they have in relationships, and even gender roles within relationships. So, like, for example, like, traditionally, like, when we look at gender roles, there will be one person leading the relationship and the other person chooses to follow. And some people feel like that's not actually ideal for them. Like, they don't feel free in that. They feel like, why is there gender roles in the first place? And some people feel like there's gender roles for a reason, like, it's very natural. We're masculine and feminine, and we complement each other in different ways. So with that being said, what is your viewpoint on gender roles within relationships?
I think everybody has to do what feels right for them. So I think if we kind of remove the gender piece from it and not be stuck in that guidance, because the minute you attach a label to something, we live within that label. So if we can think about it as, look, what comes naturally to you, what is good for you, what are your strengths in the relationship? So for example, even if it is the man saying, do you know what, I'm actually better with the kids, I want to stay at home and want to work. If that works for you as a couple, then you should do that. If the say a female is, the person that wants to stay at home or wants to go and work, then I think between the two of you should discuss what works for you, and what, and try and work with that. Because the minute you start saying, right, well, because you're female, you need to be doing this, and that isn't your natural inclination, then you're going to come up against some resistance and some problems within yourself, and that will create more problems. So I believe you should just have that discussion. And expectations are resentments in the making, right? So the minute you have an expectation that your partner should put the bins out every Friday night, and they don't do it, then resentment builds up, right? But if you are, well, actually, I'll put the bins out because I don't mind putting the bins out. It's just those simple things that we can do. But the minute we have expectations on another person, we are setting ourselves up for resentment, because we cannot put expectations on another person. We have no right to do that. And when we see that, and we take responsibility and be accountable, but it all comes with really good communication as well. So you've got to be able to communicate with your partner with the things that you feel comfortable with doing and what you don't feel comfortable with doing. And there's got to be that emotional safety between the two of you, so you can have those conversations. So that's really important. But I would be wanting to just remove the whole labeling of things and just do what feels natural, do what feels good for you, because we all, as human beings, the human condition is we do what makes us feel good. We naturally do that. And if we're being pushed into doing something that doesn't naturally feel good to us, we are going to, there's going to be some resistance there. And that creates resentment. And then that creates a whole other cycle, of problems. But it really is about communication, making sure. But when I talk about communication, you have to be aware of the space you're in first before you communicate, because we only communicate based on how we feel. So if we are in full of resentment and we are feeling, unhappy with things, then that's how we're going to communicate to our partner, with that loaded behind it. So when you have a really good understanding of how humans work, because I know I keep going back to this, but it's really important. When we have this understanding, some of that stuff just naturally falls away. And then when you realize, actually, I'm going to have this conversation with my partner, and I'm going to feel good when I have this conversation, you'll have a way better conversation. You'll have much more success with that conversation than what you would have done if you were feeling resentful or feeling upset. So I hope that's answered your question in terms of in terms of that. Yeah.
Yes, and speaking further on doing what feels natural, like
Mm.
a lot of people, they're in relationships, but it doesn't mean that they don't have attraction towards other people naturally, right?
Yeah.
And some people feel like, okay, I've committed to this relationship, so I'm gonna suppress my feelings and just focus on this relationship that I'm in. And some people feel like, well, I want to be free and I want to do what comes naturally to me. And that might look different for different people, right? So
Yeah.
in that context, like there are different relationship dynamics, like monogamy and non-monogamy, and like options for people to pursue based on their interests. So with that being said, what is your viewpoint on monogamy versus non-monogamy?
I think, like I said before, well, it's a personal choice for starters, right? So if you want to go down, we'll take the non-monogamous, sorry, the monogamous, sorry, non-monogamous route first. If you are wanting an open marriage or open relationship and you both want the same thing, then I think that, that's fine, absolutely fine, as long as you are both on the same page. I think what is important with those situations is that you have some, I don't like the word rules, but if there's some guidelines or some things that you need to put in place, like almost like a guideline or process of how that will work, because you both need to firstly understand why you're doing it. Because if one person is doing it because, and the other person doesn't really quite understand, it sometimes doesn't go that well. So there has to be really, really open communication with this kind of thing, and everyone needs to know their role. And there needs to be some, if there is a third party, they need to know their role, and that can actually work really well together, as long as everybody understands why they're doing it, what the benefits are, and their role in that, and they stick to the guidelines. But the minute you overstep the guidelines, or the guidelines are blurred, that's when problems will occur. And maybe somebody's feeling insecure about something, or someone has done something outside of the rules, and that's when mistrust comes in, and those sorts of things. So I think if you are going to go the non-monogamous route, then you just need to be very open with your communication. Everyone needs to know their role. But with monogamy, it's a similar thing as well, because everyone has a different definition of betrayal. So, is betrayal to you texting another person, or is betrayal sleeping with someone else? And there's a massive spectrum in between that. So you also, as a monogamous couple, need to figure out what that means to you. So again, you've got guidelines, there's clarity there, because the minute that gets overstepped, then you both know what the line is, and what can be crossed and what can't be crossed. And everyone's open to their own interpretation. Each couple will have their own definition for things, and they've got to work that out. But you've got to communicate. You've got to talk about this stuff. The earlier, the better. Because if you are, down the line, all of a sudden you've got difference of opinion of what betrayal is to you, that's going to be, a difficulty. But so earlier the better to have these communication discussions around that, I think.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
So say that again?
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I wanted to ask you though, like, do you feel like there's something missing in a relationship when somebody wants to open up the relationship, or do you feel like a relationship can be wholesome even if it's open?
I think it can be wholesome if it's open, and I think if we understand the reason why, if a partner is looking at their partner and saying, a person is looking at their partner and saying, actually, there's some things missing in you. I need to find something else in someone else because you don't have that. That's a very different thing, because that would probably make the person that really uncomfortable with that, thinking there's something wrong or there's something missing. And I don't think that would work so well. But I think if it's two people thinking, actually, we both just want something original. There's nothing missing with each other. We both love each other very much, and this would be the primary relationship. But we're just going to be open to some other things according to the guidelines. And I think that could work that could work well. But I think, again, it's, there's conversations need to happen, and both of you need to be really clear and really discuss the parameters of how that would work. And I think that the downside of this is it's often one person that maybe is the insecure person. Maybe there may be one person leading that, saying, actually, let's go for an open relationship. But if the other person is going along with it just to please the other person, that isn't going to work, because ultimately they're going to have, jealousy issues or insecure feeling about that. So, and it's the duty of both parties really to make sure that the other person is comfortable with whatever happens. And the minute someone isn't comfortable, then you need to maybe stop and reassess what's going on there.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking about jealousy, like regardless of if a relationship is monogamous or non-monogamous, jealousy can always arise. For example, in a monogamous situation, it could be like, I notice you're speaking to this person a lot or spending time with this person. In a non-monogamous relationship, it could be you're spending more time with that partner than you're spending with me, and things like that. So like, it's to the point that like the person that's been accused of things wants to let their partner know that there's nothing to be jealous about. So in your opinion, how could someone that's feeling these jealous emotions start to deal with the emotions of jealousy?
I think there's a couple of things with jealousy. I think that we all feel jealous, right? It's actually a normal emotion for us to feel. It's actually healthy amounts of jealousy is actually not a bad thing. For example, if you're out and your partner is talking to a beautiful person, and you get a pang of jealousy, that's actually quite natural. And I think it's probably a good indicator to say that you really like this person or you're really in love with this person, and it actually can make you appreciate them more. So I think if you're in that healthy amount of jealousy, then, and you recognize that what it is, then that's okay. And obviously your partner will then come back and squash anything or let you know what's happening and make you feel secure. That's all good. That can be a positive thing. But I think it's when you're jealous for and you're not really given the right reasons to be jealous, and that is a different thing. That's down to your own insecurity. That is fear. That is just a fear-based feeling of losing the other person. And when we have that fear, it spills out in our energy. And actually, if the person is actually quite innocent and not doing anything that's causing any jealous behavior, where that energy that the person has, that insecurity and feeling of fear, can generally push someone away, because if they know that they're not doing anything wrong, they're making them feel secure, but yet the other person is still feeling very insecure and accusing them or having jealous outbursts or anything like that, then they really do need to have a look at what's going on there, because they're not recognizing what is healthy jealousy and what is not healthy jealousy. So they've got to know where they're at. They've got to know where they're at with that and be willing to look at that and find out what the reasons are behind that. But I think if somebody is, look, if you are with a partner and you're in a loving, connected relationship, you don't need to, in my experience, I think, I'm talking about majority of monogamous relationships. If you are in a healthy, loving, connected relationship, you don't generally look outside of that. You're getting your needs met within that. And if you are trying to make someone else jealous, you've got, that's your insecurity, right? If you've got to look at that as well. So what would be helpful if there is jealousy going on in a relationship at the moment, you just take a step back and just see what's going on. Do I have the right to be jealous in the situation? And I think if you have agreed up front, like I said earlier about in terms of what betrayal is and all those sorts of things, if those things are already discussed and decided, then you know where you stand with that. And I think if somebody is hiding something, if whatever it is, if there's any secrets of any kind, then that is maybe not the best way I would stop and just take a look at that. Because secrets don't work well in monogamous relationships or non-monogamous even, because everything should be open. So if that's happening, you need to take a step back and have a look at what's going on there.
Yeah, for sure. Now, sometimes, there is a good reason for the jealousy and the fear, because, things happen. Like, for example, infidelity happens in relationships, and the fear that they had of, like, the reason that they were feeling jealous, there was actually a reason for it because of what has happened. So, like, once that has happened, a trust has been broken in the relationship or the agreement in the relationship. So, like, once that trust has been broken, do you feel like there can be like reconciliation in that relationship, like in terms of forgiveness in the relationship, or do you feel like the relationship has been damaged and the trust can never be regained to what it was before?
Yes, I believe it can be restored, but I think that both parties need to be willing to do that. If both parties are wanting for it to work, it can absolutely work. And I've seen that happen. So I've seen people that have been, cheated on, and they have been able to get things back together. And actually, it can work really, really well. But you've both got to be willing. So firstly, you need to decide what it is you want to do. Do you want to stay with this person, or do you not want to stay with this person? If you decide that you do want to stay together, then you have to understand why it happened. Because generally speaking, if you have cheated, or and I'm talking about majority of relationships, if you have cheated, there's a reason why, and that something is obviously broken in the relationship for you to go outside of that relationship for that to happen. And actually, this may be hard for some people to hear, but if you are in that partnership, you have contributed to something for that to happen. I'm not saying you're to blame for your partner cheating on you or anything like that. Please don't hear that as fault. But I'm just saying that the relationship must have been broken to some degree for that to have happened. And you have to be willing to look at what your part. Both people need to be looking at what that role was before you can move forward and take accountability for those pieces. Obviously, you're not responsible for someone else's actions, so don't hear it in that way. But we all play a part in our relationship. If there's two people in a relationship, you play 50% of that. So we have to be willing to look at that. But I would also advise, if that is your decision to work on it, I would always get professional help, because to guide yourself through that is very, very difficult. Third party who has expertise in that area will be better off guiding you and helping you through that process, so that you can see what it is. And just to make sure that, the person that has been unfaithful, let's say, they need to be willing to just be open with everything, hand over everything, be willing to obviously apologize and be accountable, but also be very open, so that the other person can rebuild trust that way. They need to be able to say, right, here's my phone, go through it if you want to. The other person may say, no, I don't need to, but be that open as an example, so that they can feel that the trust can be built up again. And then the person that, once that trust has built up with the person that was cheated on, they need to be able to, in time, once they have worked through it, be able to put that down and be able to move on and move forward. They can't keep throwing that back when other things happen, because you just can't move on from there. You're going to have to be able to put that down and move forward. So yes, it can absolutely work, and it can be great, if both parties are willing to reconnect and go from there. And again, it's all about our thoughts. We think, well, if you cheated, that's it. We can't go there. But actually, you can if you want to. You just got to see it from a different perspective. But obviously, the other person has got to be willing to give you what you need to rebuild that trust. That is so important.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Yeah, so Amanda, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for everything that you've shared.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Where could people find you, find out more about you, and find out more about what you do?
Yeah, so I am on Facebook, Amanda James Coaching. I'm on a Facebook page. I work off my own profile as well. But if you go to Amanda James Coaching on Facebook, I can give you the link if you like. You could put it in the comments. I also, if you want to email me directly, it's amanda@amandajcoaching.com. I don't know whether this will be handy, but I've actually done a free ebook as well, which is about 3 common myths that keep people stuck. I can give you the link to that. It's completely free. So if people want to have a look and read, it talks about some things that are really common in relationships and how to get out of it. So more than happy to share that with you as well. So
excellent. And for the viewers, all the links to her socials will be in the description, so you can contact Amanda and find out more about what she does. Once again, Amanda, thank you so much for coming on. Any final words before you wrap up?
Final words. Wow. Well, firstly, you're not alone. Whatever you're going through, lots of other people are going through it, so you can take some comfort in that. And secondly, you don't have to struggle. You really don't. So get some help, speak to someone, and get it sorted, because it's so important.
Excellent. Thank you, Amanda.
Okay. All right. Cheers. Good to see you. Take care.
All right.